Welcome back to Prime Sports Media. My name is Andrew Hernandez, and we're going to go through some of the football questions going into the 2025 high school football season. A week ago, practice opened up for most of the high school football teams across the Northern Illinois region as well. So this week is the second week of practice, and next week we are almost to game time. Almost Friday, August 29th, and Thursday, August 20th is the first official week of when we have high school football games, and also it's a big week in the football world as well. That is also the opening weekend for college football, and then the following week after will be the opening week for the NFL as well. So a big time in the sports world right now. So here we go. So first question, who is going to step up in Dixon? So the Dukes are coming off back-to-back seasons where the Dukes finished 8-1 in the regular season. So Dixon in 2023 did make the playoffs. They made it all the way to the second round as they lost to, I believe, the 4A state runner-up Burbank St. Louis. Last year, the Dukes went to the quarterfinals for the first time since 2017. So this means that new players will have to step up in Dixon after the graduation of All-State quarterback Colin Shaner and wide receiver and linebacker All-State Eli Davidson. So this means for the Dukes that new players will have to step up at key positions. At those key positions, if they want to compete for double-digit wins, once again. So for returners, they have a lot of offensive line, defensive line. Most of it is also coming back. Also, their top running back, Landon Knigge, is also coming back for his senior season. He'll be leading the Dukes in the running game as well. So some of the players that are looking to take the reins will be a quarterback. They're going to come in with junior quarterback Jagger Kemp. Kemp last year was a backup for Colin Shaner as a sophomore. He did get a lot of time, during those mop-up times the Dukes had last season. And also Jake Wayland also back. He finished second in tackles behind Eli Davidson last year. So with an experienced defensive line, if the defensive line lived up to what they did last year, Dixon, their goal probably this year is to make a deep run, but, hopefully we can see that. And number two, can Byron pull off a deep run this season? So the Byron Tigers, once again, are loaded with talent coming into the season. So they did everything, last year. They did finish 9-0, outscoring their teams by 40 points that they played last season, except for Dixon last season. They went 10-1 last year, losing to the defending state champions in 3A, the Montini Broncos. So Byron, they did despite everything. They missed some of their key players from last year, Katie Considine and J.J. Epson. So what I've watched their preview on Eyewitness News on their YouTube page. So they got a lot coming back, and it's a good thing. Considine and Epson are going to be, they're fully healthy again. So as long as they stay healthy, throughout the season, expect big things as well from the Tigers. Well, while Considine was out, sophomore Katie Magoo last year as a freshman fill in. He was a terrific player for the Tigers. So Magoo, he's probably going to step up, these next 2 years, the next 2 years coming, after Considine graduates. And there's a lot of talent. They got a lot of, fast kids coming back this season for Byron. Andrew Talbert, he's feeling, really fast again this year. So Talbert, he's going to be, a real threat at as a mobile quarterback. So Byron, I expect, I think this team's going to make a run. Week 2, that's going to be that big matchup as well at Everett Science Stadium, Byron and Dixon. So that matchup is going to be a big one to watch in the Big Northern Conference if you do, follow the Big Northern as well. So even this year, Byron, they might be able to sell out the stadium because they did some upgrades over the summer to Everett Science Stadium. So one of the new upgrades they did is they got a new track, they got a new homestand. So their new homestands is where the old visiting side Sands were, and then some big stuff for Byron. For Byron this year and Dixon, those two are coming in as Big Northern Conference favorites as well. So we'll see what happens. So next up, can Oregon make another playoff appearance? So the last 2 years, the Hawks have made the playoffs. So this year, they're going to have a lot of speed. Oregon's going to come in with a lot of speed. So some of the key players as well, they're going to have a lot of speed on. So they return Cooper Johnson, a senior, Keaton Salisbury. So juniors, Jaden Berry and Jacob Donhagen, I believe, will bring a lot of speed in the backfield as well for Byron. So, not Byron, I mean Oregon. I know why I said Byron, because a lot of people in the Big Northern Conference who follow it, they're used to saying Byron. So the Oregon Hawks, they've been a team on the rise in the Big Northern Conference. The last 2 years, they've made the playoffs. And I think this year, they want to make a leap. They're trying, to contend for the conference, be another contender in the upcoming years to be in the Big Northern as well. So Oregon, I really, I'd love to see this team, shock everyone this year in the conference. So they have a returning quarterback and senior Benny Alaude is back as well. So this team, I really, in my Big Northern Conference prediction, I had them going 8-1, tying with, Byron and Dixon, seeing them, win a conference title, have a share of a triple tie. So, but I know the reality of it, but it's going to be either Byron or Dixon, winning the conference. But, for me, it would be great to see a team, who's going to step it up in the conference as well. So next up, we go to the NUIC conference, and we're going to talk about the Dupec Rivermen. So this is an interesting era that we're going into if you followed NUIC. So it's also the beginning of the post-Hoffman era in Dupec. So this year, Kyle Demas is taking over as Dupec's head coach, replacing Tyler Hoffman. So it's the first time in a while since the co-op began that there's not a Hoffman name going in this year for the Dupec Rivermen. So taking over at quarterback will be senior Lucas Rossdale. I think he played running back last year for Dupec. So Dupec, this team, I really have them winning the Northwest Upstate Illini Conference this year. Kind of as a little send-off, for them. Because next year, Dupec are going over to the Big Northern Conference next year to fill out that 10-team league, 10-team system league, to have a 10 league. Again. So I really, Dupec the last 2 years have made the quarterfinals. In the last 2 years in the playoffs, they have played some Big Northern Conference schools like Stillman Valley, Oregon. They played Stillman Valley in the first round, second round. 1 year played both Oregon and Stillman Valley. They did play Byron in the quarterfinals back in 2023 when they were making that, historic state run, 2 years ago. And then last year they did play Genoa Kingston last year in the playoffs. So this year they're also playing Byron this year. So kind of for them it's going to be a little taste or preview for what's yet to come in the Big Northern Conference. But, for the Kyle Demas era in Dupec, some people may say, that Dupec's an interesting team, they returned talent from last year that played, at a lot of key positions, but, Dupec, they may have some struggles a bit, but we'll see what happens during the season. So next up is Newman. So the Comets are another team that's a favorite last year. They won the Free Rivers track division, Free Rivers Rock division last year. So the Comets come in with the transfer in Orson's Rylan Alvarado. this year. So after winning state medals and being part of Morrison's track and field state championship team this past spring, Alvarado is coming over to Newman. He played running back at Morrison. So Alvarado, can he lead that tailback for Newman? So Newman's heavy run offense. With Alvarado, when I first heard that he was going over, when I saw that, he was with the Newman football, I was like, that tailback offense, the running game at Newman, heavy run offense. So I think he can fit in with Newman's roster. But this team, Newman this year, they're gonna have high expectations, and they're actually, what I saw from the NYC page, they have them as a preseason, number 3 ranked when it comes to Class 1A. So this team, I think, this team's gonna make a run in Class 1A. So, this Newman team, I got them winning their side of the track, this year. But the Comets will kick off week 1 at Princeton, and then week 9 will be another good one for them as they take on Monmouth Roseville. But knowing from the track, it's really good football conference. A lot of those teams, there's some teams that may be on the rise this year as well in the track that may shock some people. But, Newman's going to be one of those teams that, that's going to be really good, from their division, despite, teams like Rock Ridge, last year, that'll be a good opponent, playing those good opponents like Rock Ridge, Princeton, Monmouth Roseville last year from that side of the Three Rivers. So next up is our 6th question is Sterling, reloads with a bunch of speed from last year. So last year they were turning, a lot of kids now have a lot of speed so most of the kids are, multi-sport athletes, over at Sterling from their football team, that what I know. So like half the team, they run track and field during the spring, do baseball, in the winter, they do basketball, wrestling, all that, that field's in. But, so on their team, they're returning 2 kids that were part of their 4x2 team that took second at state this past spring. So their depth chart, is going to have a lot of speed from the running backs, receivers, and secondary that are filled with a lot of young talent. But, this team is, probably the fastest ones in the Western Big Six, that I've seen. So I think Sterling, the Western Big Six this year, what I've been following, it's the conference, what I've seen, Quincy, they have been on a run the last 2 years. Moline have been on a run. So it's kind of been, the 3 that were the favorites were Sterling, Moline, and Quincy. So that conference is going to be wide open. So this year, the Western Big Six, it's back. They're back to having 8 teams in the conference. So this year they'll have they got Alden coming back. So it's going to be a good one this season. So Sterling, they open up on the road at Metamora, and then the Western Big Six opener will be against Moline at home. So this team, I can't wait to see what this team does. And next up, our final question, is the Lena Winslow Panthers. So the past 2 decades, Lena Winslow has won many Northwest Upstate Illini Conference championships, 6 state championships. They played in the past 7 state championship games. So the Panthers this year, this season they've upgraded a lot on their football field with the new track system and a new turf field, and I believe they added a digital scoreboard as well. So it's a good upgrade when you have one of the best teams at the small school level in the state of Illinois. So Lena Winslow, so this year they're favored again to win the NUIC. So one of their biggest opponents is going to be week 3 when they go on the road to face Rochelle, another team last year that had a great quarterfinal appearance. So that opponent for week 3 matchup is going to be really good. So the last 2 years, what I've been looking at, the last 2 years in the NUIC, or not from the NUIC, but from, small school level, teams that are small school levels, have beaten bigger schools, because back in 2023, Newman beat Rock Island in overtime, and that was one of the biggest wins, I believe, for the Newman football program in many years. And then you had Morrison last year, defeated Galesburg last year on the road down in Galesburg. So I kind of knew going in that win's going to be expected, but some people may say, oh yeah, Morrison, they might have a disadvantage because, for one, they're a small school, and they play, they might have to play, they're not used to playing bigger schools like this, but like, they knew Morrison knew that they can go in there, those were the free big wins, coming out of a small school, beating a school that's 5A, the 1A school that's beat a 5A, 6A, 7A class school in the state. So for Lena, I expect this team, Lena's going to try to make a deep run again this year. So the last 2 years, they have, they finished as the runner-ups the last 2 years, falling up short. 2023, they fell short to Camp Point Central, and then back in 2024, they fell short last year to Althoff Catholic, getting blown out, as one of their kids last year from Althoff, had a Oregon commit that, went off that game. So this year, so those were my questions going into this year. So next week will be week 1. So some of the games so Rock Falls for the Big Northern, they open up, football on the Thursday night on August 28th with Rock Falls and Byron. And then most of the games will kick off on Friday, August 29th, and Saturday, August 30th, for games that are played on Saturday, on the afternoon or Saturday night as well. So it's also a big weekend for the football world as well. That weekend will be big because it's also the opening weekend for college football. On Labor Day weekend is always a big time for college football to open up, and it's also the kickoff for the NLB for the playoff race as well. So the race to October, and then the following week after that is also the NFL's opening week. So have a great morning, and also have a great day as well. This is Aaron Nash, Prime Sports Media. I'm out.